I slipped and fell while taking a bath. Due to a car accident, I lost my sight unexpectedly. I was overjoyed. But when I rushed to tell my husband, I discovered him kissing our maid in the living room. I stood frozen in place. They saw me, and I quickly pretended I still couldn't see. The maid gestured by raising her hand to her eye and mouthing, "What are you panicking about? He's blind." But what happened next shattered my worldview completely. It was my birthday that day. Sam, my husband, arranged a private concert with his band friends to help me move past the darkness on my 30th birthday. He was the lead singer, performing all the songs we loved during our dating years. His singing wasn't great, but the depth of emotion in his voice moved me more than any beautiful song could. I was deeply touched. Amid everyone's cheers and with a bit too much to drink, I can't recall how I got home. I just remember slipping in the bath, which wasn't serious. I bumped my head on the bathtub and got a big bump on the back of my head. But unexpectedly, my eyes could see again in that moment when I saw clearly the decorations in the bathroom. My alcohol wore off completely. My first reaction was to share this good news with Sam. But before I could get up, I faintly heard voices outside the bathroom. It was Nancy, our maid. "Sam, be honest with me. Do you have feelings for that blind woman? We agreed that today's concert was just going through the motions. Why did you sing with such deep emotion? And what's with your friends calling her sister-in-law? Am I invisible?" I felt as if I'd been struck by lightning. I stood there stiffly, unable to process the weight of those words for what felt like an eternity, until their voices faded into the distance and I could no longer hear them. Did I finally piece together the message I'd been played? The third party had been living with me since I left the hospital, caring for me, Nancy, our maid. I'd never felt so heartbroken in my life. Not even when the doctors told me after the accident that I might be blind for life. Scenes of Sam's kindness over the years flashed before me, along with the image of him proposing to me without hesitation in the hospital room after the accident. I crouched in the bathroom, crying silently and agonizingly, my heart torn apart. The disbelief grew inside me, coupled with the desire to escape. I composed myself with a glimmer of hope, pretending to still be drunk as I stumbled out. When I saw them in the master bedroom, Sam was embracing and kissing another woman. My face turned pale under the bright lights. They kissed brazenly, as if I, the mistress of the house, were dead. When I got a close-up view of her face again, my heartache was unbearable. Nancy, the maid, turned out to be Sam's cousin. Blood-related, they were doing this kind of thing. I felt a wave of nausea that I couldn't contain in my stomach. I covered my mouth and let out a retching sound, enough to startle the two inside the room. All movement ceased instantly. They turned to look in my direction. When they saw me, Sam instinctively pushed Emily away and called out to me. He took a step towards me, but as he passed Nancy, she quickly grabbed his arm, raised her hand to her eye in a straight motion, and mouthed, "What are you panicking about? He's blind." Then, seeming to show Sam off with anger, she forcefully grabbed his face in front of me and kissed him several times on the lips, clinging to him like an octopus, urging him to hold her and walk towards me. Her nails dug fiercely into the door frame. I bent over, watching this scene, feeling an overwhelming urge to rush forward and tear this pair of adulterers apart. But I held back. Especially when I saw on the bedside of Sam and me. Hanging on the wall was the wedding photo of him and Nancy. That kind of year-long career in the cold. Such as hand grab all my impulsive iron. I cannot let them know I've see you again. With a loud bang, Nancy slammed directly into the wall, sliding down to the ground. In my mind, I chuckled coldly, then swiftly dove into Lin Chen's arms. Gripping his arms tightly in fear, I asked him in astonishment what the sound was. Nancy's face turned pale as she got up from the ground angrily, glaring at Sam. But seeing Sam's troubled expression, he reluctantly spoke up. "It's me, Nancy. I was passing by the bathroom and noticed you were missing. Worried you might have rushed out and accidentally fallen." Nancy's mind worked quickly. She was a formidable opponent. I thought to myself, intoxicatedly responding to him. Sam helped me onto the bed. I thought this near collision would at least make them behave for the rest of the day. But I never expected that just half an hour later, Sam would leave me alone. Nancy, who was standing by, helping me drink water and take medicine, couldn't contain herself and did something utterly absurd that shattered my worldview. Teasing Sam, she stood beside me with a glass of water, subtly provoking him. His movements were light and made no sound, but his face showed satisfaction from revenge and a wild pursuit of excitement. Eventually, he began unbuttoning his shirt directly in front of me. Lying in bed, I watched this scene, almost unable to control the revealing expression on my face. I clenched my hand tightly under the blanket, forcing myself to calm down. With the corner of my eye, I glanced back at Sam, and it was clear he couldn't resist the temptation, reacting with a disgusting look. Hastily stuffing a few pills into my mouth, he held Nancy's foot as she leaned towards him. Unstable as he said in a hesitant tone, "You've had too much to drink. Take your medicine and rest early. I still have some work to finish, so I'll go back to the office for a while." Without waiting for my response, he hurriedly got up, dragging Nancy away. As they left, he pretended, "Nancy, you should go back to your room and rest early too. Looks like you might have hurt your knee from the fall." "I'll go get some medicine for you," Nancy said, putting down her glass and starting to walk out. Suddenly, something occurred to her. She stopped abruptly, turned around, and gave me a disdainful look. Pulling out her phone, she quickly typed a message and scrolled it up to show Sam. "Don't you think it's more exciting to do that kind of thing right in front of him?" After Lin Chun finished reading it, she added another line. "Especially since he's drunk and blind tonight. What a perfect opportunity. Are you sure you don't want to give it a try?" The large font was clear on the screen of her phone, and I could read it clearly, watching helplessly as she tossed the phone into Sam's lap. Then, she walked over to the desk not far from the bed, opened the laptop, pulled out a chair, and motioned for him to sit down. What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. Before I could figure out what they were up to, Sam, unable to resist her temptation any longer, nervously walked over to her. As soon as he sat down, Nancy turned her back to him and straddled his lap. The computer screen lit up at that moment, facing towards the bed. I lay there, openly watching as Nancy opened a document and, while engaging in their sordid act, clattered away on the keyboard, transforming all the words he should have said into text within that document. Ha! What a way to handle business, I thought, impressed by her cunning. If I hadn't suddenly regained my sight, I wouldn't have known how adept Sam, who always portrayed himself as honest, could be at playing games. In an instant, memories of countless times in our less than a year of marriage when he said he had to work late flooded back. I recalled feeling deeply guilty at the time, believing I was a burden to him and that he had to work so hard just to support me. A useless person. The nausea I had finally managed to suppress surged up again, and I clenched my nails into my palms. Lying in bed, I stared expressionlessly at them sitting in that chair, enduring until it was over. That night was the darkest moment of my life. The pain from the accident had already been deeply ingrained, but it was nothing compared to the half-truths they inflicted upon me. Eyes wide open, I lay from dusk till dawn, each scene etched into my mind like poisonous needles stabbing into my heart, gradually transforming me from anger and sorrow to numbness and now to this silence. At 8 a.m., Sam left for work while Nancy, yawning, prepared breakfast in the kitchen. Watching them make a concerted effort to deceive me, I sat quietly on the sofa, discreetly observing every corner of the living room. I noticed that the house, which I had bought with my own money, was decorated completely differently from the plans I had proposed, filled with gaudy candy colors everywhere. In the center of the living room, there was even a photo of Sam and Nancy in their wedding attire. Glancing sideways, I saw Nancy wearing similarly colorful pajamas. My hand trembled as I held a glass of water. And suddenly, the words I overheard last night after regaining my sight rushed into my mind. Uncontrollably, a conclusion formed in my heart. Are Sam and Nancy treating my house as their own marital home? The thought of Nancy being hired after I moved into this house, which was mine, made beads of sweat break out on my back uncontrollably. Subconsciously, I looked towards the open kitchen and saw Nancy boldly reheating leftovers, stir-frying them and serving them without bothering to wash them. Then taking a few cucumbers from the refrigerator and tossing them into the same dish, uncut and cold, with the dish. Once I made sure he had left the neighborhood, I finally had the chance to inspect the entire house. Everywhere in this apartment was filled with Nancy's belongings. Even my own things that I brought over from the old house were tossed into the utility room. There, I even found torn photos of Sam and me in our wedding attire. My expression immediately darkened as my suspicions were confirmed. I returned to the master bedroom, staring at the wall covered with Nancy's life photos. I was so enraged that I couldn't stop trembling all over, especially when I saw the happy smiles on their faces. I couldn't restrain myself from wanting to smash everything in that room. I remember clearly. Sam and I started decorating this place after he proposed 3 years ago, during the rapid rise in housing prices. One of my projects at the time had earned me a substantial bonus, so I combined it with my savings to pay for this house in full. Because it was under construction at the time, I continued to live in my old house that was left to me after my parents passed away. Sam appeared during this period as an employee from the company that was a project partner. I frequented their office during that time and we got acquainted. He started pursuing me, claiming it was love at first sight for him. I was 27 then, not young anymore. and in an era when the concept of being an older unmarried woman was increasingly talked about. Any woman would have some anxiety about this. Added to that, Sam's eager pursuit and his meticulous care for me made me agree to his pursuit. For those 2 years, Sam truly appeared honest and simple. He would blush and be reserved, sometimes even showing a sort of awkwardness and innocence as if he had never been in love before, making me feel that he was a rare find in this open society, offering his sincere heart to me. Then I had a car accident. I thought, given human nature, Sam would give up on me. But he didn't. The day I woke up, he solemnly proposed to me, saying he loved me for who I am, not my eyes. No matter how I change, through sickness and health, he would never leave me. At that moment, I truly believed I was the luckiest person in the world. Even amidst my gratitude, I voluntarily added his name to the house deed after having it notarized. But now, everything in front of me is like a slap in the face. What kind of terrifying person could, after proposing to me, quietly start decorating our marital home according to his cousin's preferences, and deceive me by saying it was all done according to my wishes? The chilling feeling of betrayal could not be more intense. I held back my raging emotions, contemplating how best to retaliate against this deceitful pair. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something, a white pill bottle covered in English writing, placed on the bedside table beside a half-filled glass of water. It was clearly the same medicine I had taken last night. In an instant, a memory flashed through my mind. The doctor had kindly informed me when prescribing it, saying it was the mildest pharmaceutical available. My heart skipped a beat. I stood frozen in place for a long while before finally approaching and picking up the pill bottle. As I scanned the English words on the label, I realized its name was quinine. A sudden chill ran down my spine. Quickly grabbing my phone, I searched for information about the medicine. Upon discovering it was used to manage malaria symptoms and had nothing to do with treating eye conditions, but instead had side effects that could harm the eyes, possibly leading to blindness. My hand trembled uncontrollably. With a loud clack, my phone slipped from my grasp and fell to the floor. Why would Sam give me this medication? Countless terrifying suspicions surged through my mind in an instant. I staggered to pick up my phone, my first instinct being to call my treating physician. I needed to clarify whether he had prescribed me that medication and if there were any effects of which I was unaware. However, I hesitated, knowing that Sam had been the one in contact with him for almost a year now. Flicking through my contacts, I contemplated whom to reach out to. Finally, I decided to call my former boss. Ever since the accident, I had been immersed in a state of depression and isolation. Since leaving the hospital, I hadn't reached out to anyone besides Sam and Nancy. As an orphan who lost both parents, I had always felt that Sam was the only warmth in this city for me. But now, that warmth had turned into a nightmare. Awakening from this nightmare, besides my former boss, I couldn't think of anyone else to turn to for help. Back when I was immersed in work and making money, my social circle was limited. Now, after being out of touch with society for so long and being followed by Nancy every day, even during the few hours today when Sam went out to buy buns, I couldn't be sure if there would be any slip-ups. I had no choice but to trust Smith, a man who had always worked well with me, was reliable, and responsible. I dialed the number. When Smith answered, I hesitated for a moment before saying urgently, "Is Smith available? Can you help me check something?" I paused and added, "It's urgent. We haven't been in touch for nearly a year." Smith seemed surprised to hear my voice and remained silent for several seconds before asking directly, "What do you need to check?" His immediate response dispelled my anxiety about not contacting him for so long and seeking his help. Gratefully, I smiled to myself, recalling the scenes of us working side by side in the past, conquering the workplace and succeeding in project after project. Smith had always been someone worthy of trust. After years of cooperation, he had never let me down. Gathering my thoughts, I decided to confide in him about my regaining eyesight and briefly explained my current situation. He listened quietly, his breathing noticeably colder for a moment. Without waiting for me to ask, he took the initiative for the next steps. "I will go to the hospital and check that bottle of medicine for you." He actually guessed my intentions. My eyes welled up with tears, hearing his decisive and swift arrangements. He said, "It's still early for now. Today is enough to find out the results. For safety's sake, only contact me unilaterally. Now, find a way to avoid taking this medicine again and start gathering evidence. If possible, create an environment where they tell the truth. Remember not to act impulsively. Stay calm and composed. You can reach out to me for anything. I'll do my best to help you." He went on and on with his advice, just like he used to conduct small meetings with me. Finally, before hanging up, he paused and said softly, "Take care of yourself, Emily." Those few words were like a cool breeze on a hot summer day. I hung up the phone, and after a morning of emotional turmoil, I regained my composure. This was going to be a tough battle, and I couldn't afford to lose to my emotions at the outset. Taking a deep breath, I deleted relevant phone records and replaced all the white pills in the medicine bottle with vitamin tablets. Noticing Nancy hadn't returned to the neighborhood yet, I used my phone to record every corner of the house, especially their intimate wedding photos. I took detailed photos and uploaded them all to a cloud storage service before deleting the phone records again. After completing these tasks, I glanced through the floor-to-ceiling windows towards the neighborhood. There, I saw Sam driving Nancy back. It was a scorching day, and being a work day, there weren't many people in the neighborhood. Nancy, with her bag of buns, jumped out of the passenger seat with a joyful smile on her face. She waved the buns at him, seeming reluctant, then dashed back, kissing Sam's cheek through the car window. They looked like a sweet couple, glaringly bright in their affection. I clenched my fists and let out a bitter laugh. Glancing at the clock on the wall, it was clear he had returned nearly an hour earlier than he had left to buy them himself. Sam was willing to skip work just to make it easier for him to move out to pick up buns. They were truly a loving pair. Yet, why did Sam marry me in the first place? As far as I knew, Sam had known him before me. As my gaze once again swept over the absurd furnishings in our home, I pondered slightly. The growing unease in my heart became more intense. In the evening, Sam, as usual, finished work early. In the past, when I couldn't see, I always felt that his early return was because he missed me at home. Now, seeing him come in and immediately embrace and kiss Nancy, and the way he eagerly accepted the small surprise I had intentionally bought for him, I suddenly realized how ridiculous I was. At this moment, I'm sitting on the sofa, like a ghost in this house. So many things go unnoticed, like the fish in the tank. But this is clearly the house I bought. My home. I watch as Sam walks towards me, carrying the leftover bits Nancy didn't want, just like he used to tempt me after work, claiming these were special gifts he bought for me. I resist the urge to sneer at him and stand up before him. Now, I'm eager to hear the results of what Smith investigated for me. This so-called husband. Every second with him disgusts me. Yet I must deal with him, pretending my emotions are due to my eyes. First, I vent my frustration on Sam, angrily smashing the gift he gave me to the ground and slapping him across the face until he storms out in anger. Nancy uses an excuse to go out and check, chasing after him. Finally, I regain my composure, retreat to the bathroom, lock the door, and turn the water on full blast. I quickly take out my phone and dial Smith's number. He seems to have been waiting for my call as he picks up immediately. I take a deep breath and nervously ask him about his findings. There's a brief before he falls silent for what feels like an agonizing 10 seconds. Just when my heart feels like it might stop, he finally speaks, revealing a result that I could never have imagined. Hydroxychloroquine wasn't prescribed by the doctor, nor was it purchased in the last year in the nearby town. Instead, he has been sporadically buying it for the past 6 years. Smith solemnly told me, "Emily, I've had someone thoroughly investigate Sam's last 6 years. And what we found might frighten you." My heart sank. What happened? In these 6 years, Sam had a total of 3 girlfriends, including you. All of them experienced sudden vision loss, mainly due to nearsightedness, but none of them sought medical attention. Additionally, due to personality conflicts with Sam, one of them even discovered his affair with Nancy, but it was never pursued further. You were the longest relationship among them, coincidentally experiencing a car accident that led to your marriage with him. If I recall correctly, before the accident, you had temporary blindness affecting your work. The accident wasn't severe, yet you ended up completely blind. Comparing with Sam's previous girlfriends, they share a few common traits: strong financial capabilities, orphaned or strained family relationships, introverted with poor social skills, past the marriageable age, and eager to wed. Smith spoke in a calm tone, deliberately adding a soothing gentleness to his words. But I couldn't help but shiver all over, with goosebumps rising. I heard Smith's definitive words at the end: "Emily planned to pursue you from the start. Your current situation isn't incidental." I just couldn't fathom why he would do such a thing. Yes. What was his motive? If it was for money, then confronting me for half of the house he got from me would lead to a falling out. Not to mention, he manages the compensation from my accident and my remaining savings. He could easily deceive me and transfer that money. Why bother pretending to love me? Going through all this trouble just for thrills? Even carrying on an affair with Nancy for a year? There must come a time when he tires of it all. especially with me around, making it difficult for them to do as they please. From what Nancy said outside the bathroom last night, it's clear she's unhappy with my presence. Still, he finally endured it, not even caring if he had a title. I can't fathom it. After hanging up, I pondered for a while. When Lin Chen returned, I apologized on my initiative. Under Nancy's hateful gaze, I deliberately kissed him on the cheek and pulled him back to the bedroom. Sure enough, once he entered, Nancy bombarded him with messages, demanding he refrain from any intimacy with me, and hurling insults at me through text. I smirked inwardly when Sam finally managed to speak up, claiming something urgent had come up. I went along with it and pretended to be hurt, saying, "Well then, can you at least show me the concert video from that day? I'll wait for you to finish before we sleep." The concert video was on Sam's phone. Anxious to leave the bedroom and deal with Nancy, he opened the video without hesitation and handed it to me. Perhaps feeling guilty or afraid of what I might hear, he kindly handed me earphones and plugged them into his phone for me, worried that he might not hear the external sound, and wary that he'd see me. Sam quickly closed the bedroom door and rushed off. I squinted my eyes and hurriedly removed one earphone, listening to the sounds outside the door while switching the phone screen to chatting app. Being blind had its perks. I could see things that Sam and Nancy never guarded against, like their chat history, which they never bothered to delete. Seeing Sam's affectionate nickname for Nancy as a darling wife made me grip the phone tightly. I swiftly scrolled through the chat logs, going back over 2 hours until Sam returned to the bedroom. I smoothly restored the page just in time, listening numbly to the heartfelt singing in the video. By then, tears were streaming down my face. Not from anger, but from fear. I never imagined that in the bathroom, trying to solve a problem that had me scratching my head, I would encounter an answer that was so difficult for me to accept. Nancy really is Sam's cousin. Not just a pretext to deceive me, but truly his cousin. From their teenage years to adulthood, they've been in a secret relationship for a whole 15 years. During this time, to conceal their illicit affair, they deliberately moved to a big city where no one knew them, pretending to live as a normal couple. Later, pressured by Sam's family as he reached marriageable age, especially since his mother, my mother-in-law, wasn't well and desperately wanted a grandson, he reluctantly started looking for a woman to marry. But which normal woman could accept his affair with his cousin? Besides, secrets don't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, their relationship would be exposed. To put an end to it all and live together like a normal married couple, Sam and Nancy devised a cruel plan. They sought a wealthy and easily manipulated woman to carry on the Lin family line and to shield them. I happened to be their third target, a lonely orphan with money but few social connections, lacking in romantic experience, and easily deceived by sweet words in my haste to get married. Moreover, I had a strong reaction to medication that Sam administered, unlike the first two women, making me the perfect choice for their needs. Once Sam thoroughly investigated my situation, he quickly began pursuing me. He pursued me relentlessly but couldn't find the right opportunity to completely gain my trust and marry me until I had a car accident, which provided him with the perfect chance to conquer me and conceal the true reason for my blindness. Everything proceeded with such meticulous order, seamlessly fitting together like a hair-raising puzzle. After reading through the chat records and piecing together the causes and effects, I began to entertain the chilling thought that even the car accident might have been their careful design, though there was no mention of it in the records. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I held the phone, watching Sam draw nearer to me. For the first time, I felt a deep-seated fear of this person. I was terrified. Just the thought of sharing a bed with such a beast for nearly a year made my limbs go cold. Even sitting on the bed, I couldn't stop shaking involuntarily. Finally, Sam noticed my unease. He rushed toward me and grabbed my arm. I looked at this man who suddenly pressed his face close to mine and instinctively slumped over, pretending to faint. Sam took me to the hospital, a place I hated the most. Strangely, the presence of so many people there brought me an unprecedented sense of relief, as if I were escaping. I slept through the night as if fleeing, managing to keep my eyes shut until noon the next day. As I looked at the intense light seeping in through the window, I calmed myself and regained composure. I figured it out. As an orphan in this situation, I could only rely on myself. If I backed down now, I would live under the shadow of fear this despicable couple cast over me for the rest of my life. I had to overcome it and strike back with the deadliest blow to them. I, Emily, am not a soft target for anyone to manipulate. After lying in the hospital for 3 days, I devised my first plan for revenge. I would make sure Sam couldn't survive in our industry. Once home from the hospital, I patiently began gathering evidence of Sam and Nancy's affair, as well as proof of their being cousins. I meticulously organized everything. I secretly called Smith and sent him all the text and images. As a big shot in our industry, Smith is well connected with other big names, often dining with them, especially close to Sam's boss. Their relationship is particularly strong. I asked him to help spread this news within their small circle. I waited quietly at home for news. Sure enough, not long after, Sam's reputation among the big shots took a nosedive. To prevent this from affecting the company's reputation once it went public, Sam's boss quickly found a pretext and fired him. After all, Sam was just a low-level employee in their company and hadn't reached an irreplaceable status. It's obvious how the decision was made. Due to his low position, Sam didn't even have the right to hear the gossip about himself. In the end, he slinked away, thinking he had done something wrong. The day Sam was fired happened to be Valentine's Day. When I heard the news, I was in a great mood. I hummed a song and used the holiday as an excuse to have Nancy prepare a table full of delicious food and open an expensive bottle of wine. Using the excuse of wanting to spend some alone time with my husband, I gave Nancy the day off. I dressed up nicely and planned to personally welcome Sam home from work. Nancy was clearly furious. Just as I finished telling her, she angrily messaged Sam. I stood next to her and watched as Sam, on social app, repeatedly expressed his anger at being fired, even cursing their boss several times. I smirked, knowing that tonight, the two of them would definitely be going out for Valentine's Day. Sure enough, not long after, Nancy shot me a triumphant glance and carefully dressed up before leaving. Shortly thereafter, Sam called. I initially thought they were just going on a date, maybe spending the night out. But unexpectedly, Sam told me he was going on a business trip for a few days. taking Nancy along. I pretended to be so distressed and aggravated. And after a few moments on the phone, I finally got him to give Nancy an excuse to let me live alone for a while. And when I hung up the phone, I was as relaxed and happy as if I'd escaped from a prison. And locking the door behind me, I poured myself a glass of wine and flicked through Nancy's friends to make sure that they were on their way to the airport. And I tweeted to Smith to tell him what was going on and asked if I had a date tonight. And if not, to come over for a drink. I sent a tweet to Smith to tell him about my situation. I asked if I had a date tonight. If not, come to my place for a drink. The first step of the plan to get rich has been implemented. The second step of the plan should be put on the agenda, but this plan is a bit complicated. I need to discuss with Smith face to face while Sam gave me a few days. I have to make use of it in a hurry. It is just that this kind of holiday, this kind of night, bothering Smith is a bit uninteresting. Thinking about Smith like this, I think he's a bit of an ass. I didn't have much hope when I thought of Smith's excellent qualifications. I didn't expect that just as I sent it, he replied in a second that it was rare for someone to be willing to spend the holiday with a single dog like me. Location sent. I'll bring you wine and you'll make the food. I remember you're a very good cook. I smiled. I hadn't cooked for a long time since I lost my eyesight. The kitchen had become a forbidden place for me. But now that I had such a rare opportunity, I felt a pang of nostalgia. I packed up Nancy's dishes and put them in the fridge. I pulled up my hair, put on my apron, and began to wash and cut the vegetables. And the doorbell rang half an hour later. Because our house was a one staircase, one flat, dialero type. So in the absence of Nancy and Sam, this was the safest place to meet me. And the door opened. I stood at the elevator door waiting for Smith. And the moment the elevator opened, I looked at this former comrade in arms. And my eyes turned red. In the absence of Nancy and Sam, this was the safest place to meet me. Elle stood in front of the elevator and waited for Smith. When the elevator opened, Elle looked at my former comrade. My eyes turned red. Elle hadn't seen him for almost a year. He was still tall and handsome except for his haircut. He seemed to have changed nothing, but my life had changed in a short period of time. After so many ups and downs. When we met, he was obviously also looking at me, and met my eyes with a surge of emotion. His eyes sank, and suddenly raised a big smile towards me, and slowly opened his arms towards me. It's been a long time. Emily paused, and he said, "Welcome back, Emily," and I was suddenly in tears, which I had been trying to restrain. And then I took a step to embrace him, and the tears came even more. And I desperately resisted the urge to embrace her for a little while longer to seek more comfort. And then I let go of her politely. As I wiped away the tears, I tried to resist the urge to hug her a little longer to seek more comfort. I closed my arms with all my might and politely let go while she wiped her tears. I gestured for her to come in. I was touched by the suit he was wearing. It was obvious that he had a business engagement. I couldn't help but to say thank you several times. Smith must have come here on short notice in order to help me. To be able to have a friend like this is the only good luck I have had since the bad luck. I followed my memory and I made several dishes that Smith loved to eat, a couple of times Smith's favorite dishes, and drank half a bottle of red wine in a row. Then I said in a cold voice, "These days I checked my account. Most of my money has been transferred to Nancy's account by Sam under all sorts of plausible names. Under normal circumstances, Nancy must have spent a lot of the money she got after all. After all, she has a lot of designer brands in her closet. But when I checked Nancy's cell phone, I found out that the amount of money in her hand had doubled, instead of decreasing. What's interesting is that he didn't tell Sam about it. But instead, he was always crying to him about his dwindling savings. Smith. You mean Nancy wanted to keep it all and had another way of getting it? Nodding to me. I've been watching him over the past few days. And I've noticed that every day after work in the wee hours of the morning he'd be chatting up a man, playing video games and sending him explicit pictures of himself. He'd be so good at tea. He tricked the man into transferring money to him many times, and he was also doing some sort of financial management. Plus, he does some financial management, so his daily income is very good. Smith narrowed his eyes and suddenly smiled. You want to get your money back through Sam's hands? I smiled along with him. That's right, but I need you to do me one more favor. Smith nodded in understanding. It seems that I need to travel for a few days as well. My second part of the revenge plan is to make Sam and Nancy bite each other to death after investigating the places where Sam and Nancy went to travel. I also contacted the man Nancy had hooked up with as the victim who had been cheated by Nancy, sent him the intimate photos of the two taken by Smith, and I sent him the address of the hotel where they stayed. He was more furious than I thought as the victim who had invested a lot of money for Nancy, but never got to meet him. I sent him the intimate photos Smith took of the two of them, and I also sent him the address of the hotel where they stayed. As a victim who invested a lot of money in Nancy but hadn't had the chance to meet him yet, he was even more furious than I imagined. And under my instigation, he did something particularly cruel the next day. He flew to the place where Nancy was traveling, stayed at the same hotel, and booked the most luxurious presidential suite, and then pretended to have seen Nancy's friends' circles, so that Sam and Nancy would be in love. He asked Nancy to go to his room. Nancy naturally didn't think that she would get into trouble just by posting a hotel photo, but he couldn't help but go to the hotel. So he lied to Sam and ran to that man's room. That man is no pushover. In order to get back at Nancy, he used a lot of perverted tactics. Not only tortured Nancy all over, but he also recorded and sent me a message. Brother, thanks for the information. He recorded it and sent it to me and left a message. Man, thanking you for the information. This bitch. And I almost beat him to death. But not long after, he had the waiter call Sam over. According to his story, Sam had just come back from a night out with a cup of milkshake that you have to wait in line for hours to get. And when he came in and saw Nancy's face, he was so pissed off. He grabbed the cup of milkshake full of ice and slammed it on Nancy's head. And then he and the dude fought. But he wasn't even close. And he was ready for him. And he beat him half to death. And left him with Nancy like she was garbage. He recorded their messy appearance and sent it to me. He was particularly generous and transferred me a red packet of $66,000 saying he was grateful to me for helping him remove his cuckold. This is a small token of appreciation. After he went back to the police and asked Nancy to spit out all the money he'd pay me an even bigger one. I never thought that the teammate that Nancy got me into trouble with would be such a generous and ruthless person. I never thought that a man could explode after he's been cuckolded. I didn't realize how much power a man could have when he'd been cheated on. But when I got so high, I posted it on the internet. And in an instant, the internet exploded. And when the mistress was caught cheating on her, I inadvertently forwarded it to Sam's mother, who's not well. And when she found out, she got even worse. And I know that was a bit mean of an action. But my mother-in-law, she's been over to my house more than once or twice. And she obviously knew about Sam and Nancy's relationship. And I'm sure that she's been there a while. She knew about Sam and Nancy. But she kept me in the dark and used me. And pushed me to give her a son. And made me drink strange remedies. And one time even put raw chicken's blood in the ash water. Because of my blindness. And I begged and pleaded. And I put up with it. But now I realized that Sam's mom was, in a sense, even more vicious than Sam, although she wasn't the murderer. She was also the biggest accomplice. A week later, Sam came back from a business trip and found a reason to tell me that Nancy quit and that his mom's condition had worsened. He sat on the couch in disheveled state and hugged me tightly and said that if he didn't have his mom, I would be the only one left. Elle laughed in my heart. But on the face I pretended to be worried and said, "Hubby, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Mom will definitely get well. Are you worried about money? Are you worried about money? It doesn't matter. My eyes can't be cured anyway. You can use our savings to cure Mom. As long as she can be cured, it doesn't matter how much money she spends." Sam's body stiffened for a moment. Soon a look of venom appeared on his face. He obviously thought of the incident where Nancy took away all of his money, and then he was touched by what I said and hugged me even tighter to hold back the nausea that was growing in his heart. I was afraid that he might get hurt. Because of this, I was afraid he would try to do something intimate with me. But after a few moments of hugging, he thought better of it and left the house as fast as he could, with a greasy head. For the next half a month, Sam was very busy every day. I would secretly watch him chatting every day, and learned that he was trying to target Nancy every day, forcing him to pay back the money. And I couldn't help but feel happy in my heart. In Sam's heart, naturally, his mother is more important than anything else. Or else he wouldn't have sacrificed his mom for him and married me, with his mother's medical bills behind him, forcing him to lose his job. Even if he had to use extraordinary means, he would definitely get back the money from Nancy. Or even more money. I got the news from Smith that Nancy had been sued by Sam and the man she cheated on. Because of the evidence, Nancy not only committed fraud but also compensated the two men with a lot of money. As for the matter of cheating, it's a matter of morality, not a matter for the law. It was a relief for Sam to know that the money had already been transferred to Sam's account, and I quickly carried out my plan to get the money from the hospital. Before he paid the money back, I called the police to my home, and with Smith's company, I showed them all the evidence that I hadn't cleared up in front of the police and told them everything that Sam had done to me. And when they had finished collecting the evidence from the house and found many robberies in the utility room, I told them that I was the one who had done it. I have been repressed for too long, and too long. All kinds of emotions finally broke out. Cover my face. I cried bitterly. The police stayed at home with me, and when Sam came in the door with the money, joyfully swarmed around him, directly pressed him to the ground. Sam was obviously stupid. He was shocked to look at the sofa sitting on the couch with me, and Smith realized what he looked towards the wall of those photos, shook his face in horror. He looked at the floor, was searched for those pills. He was suddenly trembling, and looked at me with a miserable face. He argued, "Wife, daughter-in-law Emily, you do not listen to your boss." Nonsense, he lied to you. Things are not like that. This man is interested in you as early as when we were dating each other. He looked at the pills that had been found on the floor, and he shuddered, and looked at me with a pale face. And he said, "My wife, my daughter, Emily, you mustn't listen to your boss. He's lying to you. It's not like that. This man doesn't want you." As early as when we were dating, I felt that he wasn't right in the eyes, that he was lying to you, because he must have seen that we're too happy, and he doesn't want to see you well. You have to trust me. Believe me. Up until now, Sam didn't even know about my eyesight. But when he saw it, his first thought was that I had come home to visit him last time. When he saw this, his first thought was that I had come to the house and found something wrong with the decor. So he called the police. But he didn't know what he meant when he said that Smith didn't want to do anything to me. so he didn't pay any attention to me. And I continued to cover my face and let the police take him away. And before they left, Sam was still screaming for me to believe him, and that I should try to get him out of the police station. And he continued to cry for several hours. And I only managed to get over it. And then, when I went to the police station, accompanied by Smith, because Sam had been arrested, I went to the police, with Smith in tow. I went to the police station, and as Sam was in custody, everything on him was searched, and I got his bank card, and I was able to transfer all the money back to my card. And all the records on his cell phone that he hadn't had time to erase were used as evidence to help with his sentencing. At the end of the summer, after I won the divorce case, I saw Sam again in the court where he was sentenced. His family had been helping him for a long time. They refused to admit that they poisoned me, and they blamed Nancy for what happened between him and Nancy, saying that Sam was forced to do what he wanted because Nancy had something on him, and that he was blind, and that I couldn't see him, and that he was trying to turn things around. But I said nothing. I just went to see Nancy before the court and Sam, and told him all about it. I didn't say anything. But before the trial in Sam, I went to see Nancy and told him all about it. Nancy is a tough guy. She really left a lot of audio evidence to prevent Sam from disobeying him. He said he wanted to use this to force Sam to bail him out after all. She's pregnant, even though the baby isn't Sam's. But it's enough to bail him out and give him some time to maneuver since Sam is in jail. And he's being so ruthless. He might as well help me out to make amends for the baby in his womb. He stared at me with a bitter and regretful smile. Elle knew you were a tough guy. The first time Elle saw you was when I went to Sam's company to see him. You were holding a meeting with the project team. You were standing there in high spirits, and your eyes were full of flair and ruthlessness. Elle knew you were not to be messed with. Elle advised Sam many times, but he didn't believe me. Congratulations, the light in Emily's eyes has returned to the original light with a bright face with Nancy's evidence and expectations. I went to the courtroom with my hair and makeup carefully styled. I chose the brightest dress, stepped on my high heels, and walked into the courtroom with a flair and a flutter, and sat down at the plaintiff's table. In the solemn courtroom, I watched as Sam was taken to the defendant's table, chained up, and with my eyes open, I watched without blinking as his face was covered with dirt and misery. And then when he was finally put in his place, he leaned back and looked at me with a look of hope and a look that was like a straw. When he was finally settled and tilted his head towards me with a look of relief, I blinked and gave him a wry, flamboyant grin, and held out 2 fingers, one to my eye, the other to his. And with my chin in my hands, I tilted my head and waited for the look that was about to come over his face. And sure enough, after nearly 10 seconds of stony silence, he suddenly stood up out of his chair in a fit of rage, and grabbed the microphone in front of him. And then I saw that Sam had been brought to the dock, locked up, with his eyes open. And I saw that Sam had been brought to the dock. The microphone. The first thing he did was to come at me. His eyes were scarlet, and he hissed, "Emily, you can see this. You can see this. Can't you? Kill you. I'll kill you. You despicable woman. You're deliberately trying to trick me." Did the words come out of her mouth one after another? The bailiff quickly stepped forward to force him to restrain him. But he was so angry that he fought with the bailiff. And I raised my eyebrows and looked at the lawyer, who said that according to Article 309 of the Criminal Code, the following punishments are to be imposed for 3 years imprisonment, detention, control, or a fine, and that he might be guilty of an additional offense. Article 309 of the criminal law provides that any person who disrupts order shall be sentenced to not more than 3 years imprisonment, detention, control, or a fine. And when he heard that what he was doing might add to his crime, he stopped moving. And the next moment he looked at me even more fiercely. But he still had a shred of sanity. And he obediently sat down. And then, when his attorney was defending him, he changed his tune and said that Nancy had been the one who did the poisoning. And he was the victim of Nancy's actions. And he was the victim of Nancy's actions. And he was the victim of Nancy's actions. He was threatened by Nancy to cover for him. He admitted he cheated on her. But he was a victim. He had no choice. And he gave me a vicious, provocative look that said, "I'll kill you when I get out of jail." I laughed as he stared at me and calmly presented Nancy's evidence to the judge. And over the course of 6 years, recordings of the two of them conspiring to do harm have been broadcast. And Sam's vicious, meticulous voice has echoed throughout the courtroom, terrifying the jury and making the jury cringe with fear. I hadn't heard the audio before, but when I heard Sam telling Nancy that he was going to create an accident to rationalize my blindness, I thought of what I'd suspected. And then I heard Nancy ask him what would happen if he didn't get it right and he died. And I held my breath. And I heard Ariel say, "Well, then, it'll just be his fault," and he said, "Damn it. Don't worry. I'm not going to let him die so easily. For the rest of our lives, we're going to be counting on his money." And as the jury's horrified sighs climbed to a crescendo, I stared coldly at Mr. Sam and remembered the day of my accident. I remember very clearly that day was a weekend, because my eyes were not feeling well, and it was affecting my work. So I asked Sam to go to the hospital with me. When Sam heard about this, he was not in the right mood. He was obviously much more agitated. But I did not care about it because I felt so bad. On the way to the hospital, he bought a bottle of water. And then he said that a friend of his called him, and that it was a bit urgent, and asked me if I could go with him first. He asked me to accompany him to the hospital. Elle saw that he was in a hurry and my eyes had been bothering me for more than a day, so Elle said yes. Then he took me to an old town. The planning of the old town is very bad. Parking spaces are very tight. The two of us had a hard time finding a parking space, and then he took me on foot to look for his friend. Elle remembered that his friend lived in a very remote area, and he took me across many roads, and it was at the last one that I had my accident. I was a few seconds before the light turned green and the light changed to red. It was a few seconds before the light turned red. And Sam was pulling me along with the crowd of people. And I don't know who was in a hurry, but I tripped as the traffic was moving fast. And then I was jostled. And then I hit a car, which wasn't moving very fast because of the crowd, but it was fast enough to knock me out of the road. And I've been blind ever since. And I can see now that the one who was there for me, and who was there with me, was Sam. And he was there for me. And I've been there for him ever since. Sure enough, while I was thinking about it, another audio track came on. And it was the sound of Sam nervously telling Nancy about the incident. And the truth was suddenly revealed in front of so many people. And all the anger I had built up over the past few days of getting back at Sam suddenly turned into a sense of gratitude that I had survived. And that I was lucky that God had given me a chance to live. And hadn't let me die in that car accident. I'm glad I didn't fall in the bathtub and go blind. Otherwise, I can't imagine what would have become of me and whether I would have been forgotten. In a prison forged by 2 demons. Until I died. I looked gratefully at the man in the jury box. Who in the bright light was dressed up today. With his sword-browed. Starry-eyed. Long and dignified. As though he were a man of the world. With a man of the world. He was so solemn and dignified, as if he was bidding me farewell to my life and welcoming me to a new one. He took out his cell phone and carefully edited a message to him. I said, "Smith, thank you for giving me a light. When I was in the middle of an eternal night and giving me the courage to turn to the sun when I was on the verge of dying." He scanned his cell phone, his eyebrows raised, and he looked up at me across the crowd and across the noise, and he smiled a gentle smile. Then for a long time he looked back at me, and then he smiled a gentle smile, and then for a long time he looked at the man in the jury room, and he looked at me and said, "Thank you, Smith." And then, after a long moment, he answered me. And he said, "I told you, Emily. You don't have to thank me for what I did for you. And I'm glad I did." After watching the story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's story. See you next time.